Welcome to the Zencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the host of the Zencast and the managing director of B Squared. If this is your first Zencast, then welcome. The aim of the Zencast is really simple. We want to reach lots of people and help everyone learn more about special educational needs and disability. This week we're discussing challenges for neurodiverse students in mainstream. My guest this week is Archie Clapcott from Awesome Archie. Awesome Archie is a neuro-affirming non-profit founded by a mum, Rebecca, and son, Archie, team. And since early 2020, Awesome Archie have written 5 books that are donated to local schools and currently used by the University Hospitals Dorset charity to both advocate and educate. Archie, being autistic, having ADHD and Tourette syndrome, gives the non-profit a real-life insight into the challenges faced by so many. And although Archie was the only supposedly guest on this week's podcast, you may hear his mum chip in. She couldn't help it. The Zencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared, and everyone knows we help schools to show the small sets of progress pupils with SEND make across a wide range of abilities and ages. But do you know about Autism Progress? This is our framework for helping profile a pupil's autism and how it impacts them. It helps us to learn about them. It's based on CERT and looks at communication, social interaction, emotion regulation, and flexible thinking. And it also includes a wide range of strategies to support the pupils. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through Autism Progress and our assessment software. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing challenges for neurodiverse students in mainstream schools. My guest this week is Archie Clapcott from Awesome Archie. Awesome Archie is a neuro-affirming non-profit founded by a mum, Rebecca, and son, Archie, team. Since early 2020, Awesome Archie has written 5 books that are donated to local schools and currently being used by the University Hospital Dorset charity to both advocate and educate. Archie, being autistic, having ADHD and Tourette syndrome, gives the non-profit a real insight into the challenges faced by so many. Welcome to the show, Archie.
Hello.
You are now 16 years old. You have gone through primary. You're in your final year of secondary and off to college in September. You started off in mainstream and had a transition to specialist that, as is often the case, wasn't the smoothest. So what were some of the challenges you had in your mainstream primary?
For the majority of my mainstream school life, there wasn't really much of an option for differentiated lessons for more specifically me. So rather than focusing on the things that I either had to or wanted to learn, I had to learn the same thing as everyone else at the same time.
I think when we talk about neurodiverse, we always seem to look for that relevance. Whereas I think if you're neurotypical, you're going to learn this, okay? And I think that's one of the I find a big difference is actually you're told to learn this, you will. A neurodiverse person told you, I don't really want to. And there is loads of reasons around that, but it's always interesting where we have this curriculum designed a certain way, but actually, and if you are working below and you need that support, it's why are we maybe not picking the things that will engage and enhance that learning to support that child to get those skills rather than just covering through certain things. So you didn't have that individualized curriculum, so you didn't enjoy that. Were there any other challenges?
One of them, really maybe tied for the biggest one, is that my behavior and kind of how I behaved was noticeably different to everyone else. And it was fairly harmful to my mental health because I felt like I was always being stared at and judged.
So was that something, because that's thing I think, not putting words in people's mouths and making assumptions, but I sometimes feel that teachers feel when a child is being naughty, almost the child doesn't know they're being naughty, or when they're being treated differently, they don't know. So you were very aware of the differences.
Yeah, I could definitely tell that I was different behavior-wise.
And because Archie's been brought up in a family where his differences have always been celebrated, there's never been a moment where we had to have a conversation of, oh, Archie, we think you're autistic. It was just, Archie, you're Archie. You be who you are, and we all make accommodations around it. But I didn't think that it would be any different in school. And actually, it's very different in school. And it wasn't their fault. It's just, it felt like Archie was the first child that they'd ever come across that had ADHD. He was unmedicated at the time and he was young. So the one thing he needed to do was climb, to jump, to spin, to rock, to roll. And he wasn't able to do that because of health and safety.
Now, Rebecca, you weren't supposed to talk on this podcast, were you? You lasted 3 minutes before you jumped in.
Actually, 3 minutes. I'm quite impressed by that, really.
Back to you, Archie. So it's an interesting thing. When did can you remember when you started to know you were different? When did you kind of feel, hang on, I'm not the same, something's different here? Can you remember?
Time-wise, it was about maybe year 4, year 5 when I saw in the lessons that with lessons it was usually a case of either other people answering questions quicker and or better than me, or me answering them quicker and better than other people. So that was really a sign.
Did you notice a difference like in playtime and lunchtime?
A lot of people were doing things that I mentally deemed as boring. Usually there was a climbing frame sort of thing. A lot of the time I'd be going up to that and hanging upside down on it. Everyone else would be talking to someone else, which I found boring.
See, my daughter's in the same year as you, my youngest, and conversations around autism started towards the end of year 7. But I asked her, when did you start noticing this? And it was around year 3 and year 4. And it was just things like, same sort of thing. She just noticed what people were talking about, what their interests were. She found some things in lessons so simple. It was the simplest thing ever, just so obvious. Why is everyone else struggling? And then the other bit she's really struggling with. And it was a real case of she knew she was different miles before it, years before it ever came a conversation at home. And we supported the things we saw, but that's probably my biggest regret is I know I experience things differently internally, and I never thought about that. So I thought I'm supporting things I see, but actually there's lots of things underneath. So when we had the conversation, it was about 3 or 4 years later after she knew she was different, and she struggled for years knowing she's different, but not knowing why, and not kind of getting the support, not going, oh, you're struggling with this, we'll help you here. It was those normal expectations around she was expected to do this. And it was just really interesting. So at primary, you had a 1-to-1?
I did. And that was, the 1-to-1 wasn't a problem, but one of the problems that was not secondary, but partly because of the fact that I had one, is that most of the time, if not all of the time, the only times during lessons I felt like I was doing well and like secure is when I had my 1-to-1 either in the room with me, but preferably sat right next to me. Because I think I used to need to be told constantly that I was indeed doing it right, to feel like I was doing it right.
So kind of that need for that, is that kind of because you felt you were doing it wrong for so long that actually I lack confidence now in what I'm doing? Not that I can't do it, but almost like everyone's made me feel like I do not have the confidence in what I'm doing. So I need that reassurance. Yes, what you're doing is the right. Is it that sort of thing?
Yeah. I didn't so much think that I wouldn't be able to do it, but I felt like I wouldn't know if I was able to do it or not unless someone told me that I was able to do it.
Did you catastrophize?
Sometimes, yeah. I still sometimes do now, but for much smaller things. It's always good to prepare for the worst.
I prepare for the worst. I plan for the best and prepare for the worst is what I do. Apparently in my head, I win the lottery every day. I always have the dream, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, it's going to change this. And then I'm literally going, but what happens if everything goes wrong? So yeah, it's interesting, but it's if you can kind of go catastrophize, but also what are the opposite of catastrophize, it kind of helps. But I think when you're young and you're constantly being told you're wrong, or you've maybe been felt, it's a natural thing just to catastrophize and struggle with those things. And how consistently did you have that one-to-one? Was it most of the time, or was it all the time, or was it not consistent?
For a lot of the time, it was fairly consistent, but whenever there would be a staff shortage due to like someone being sick or just being somewhere else, maybe on a trip with another year, it was typically my one-to-one that got pulled away to fill in their place.
So over the time, did you have a couple of different one-to-ones?
I did a couple times. Usually it was always the same one. He was called Mr. Holloway. And toward the end of school and sometimes in the middle, I did have my mother come in to help me as well if he wasn't in or if he was helping someone else.
And how was it having your mum in the classroom?
It was definitely better than being alone in the classroom with no help, because it felt like I knew I wasn't at home, but with her being there, it felt a bit more secure because I associate her with being at home.
See, for me, my mum was a teacher, and I remember being in year 2. It was a snow day. This was years ago. And this was when everyone was employed by the local authority. And if you couldn't go to your school that you worked due to traffic, you went to your local school. So I walked into registration in year 2 on this snowy day, and my mum was the teacher. And that was the worst day of my life in my childhood. So it was interesting. When I found out that your mum was your one-to-one, I had to ask, how was it? But I can completely see that actually in that situation, because in talking to you and your mum, that support you have at home, I can really see actually how that's going to give you a real boost in confidence, that actually she knows where you need the support, but also knows actually this is where he doesn't. Also, she probably learned a lot about you, because I always find that how children are at home and how they are in school is different. And do you think you were different at school? Did you mask?
Yeah, I masked a lot. I was definitely very different, like displaying emotions wise. Even at school now, I still mask a lot. I'm nowhere near as masking sadness and like desperation to go home as I was in my old school. But I do tend to not show much emotion at school or somewhere that's not home. That's usually why I speak in the same pitch of voice.
Do you aim to slowly peel that mask off? Do you think, like, kind of the further you get from that mainstream school, so as you go into college, do you think you're going to unpeel that mask a bit more?
I'm certainly going to try. I hope I'm able to. But for me, it wouldn't be the end of the world if I don't, because as long as I have time at home, that's always a time to unmask.
Because I think it is a case of, I think with my daughter, she wants to unmask, but it's that environment. So you will go hopefully to college going, I'm not going to mask, I'm going to do this. But how that environment is for you, that's probably going to be the deciding factor. And it's protection, isn't it? It is always, you're masking to protect yourself. So you mentioned, like, at break time, you'd be hanging upside down and others would be chatting. So you obviously had different interests at school.
Yeah, very.
So was it a case of, because everyone has to do English and maths, it's rather boring. But I always found when I was at school, I was able to bring something from home in to help engage my learning, or there were clubs that were on. Was that a case for you?
There were clubs that were on, but I wasn't really fussing those. Sometimes I had a laptop bag and a laptop, but when I had my laptop out of the bag, I filled it with Lego bricks from home. So during lesson or during break time, if I didn't want to be outside, I'd take them out of the bag and build whatever on my desk.
Yeah. I think there are things like Lego clubs and things like that becoming more popular. And it's interesting, I did the whole podcast on Lego therapy, and actually it isn't just building, there's lots going on, which is really nice. But it's odd because I think schools have to fit for the majority. They work for the majority. But I think with a big push on inclusion, they need to stop going, okay, what else do we need to do? And it isn't that Archie's interests are purely Archie's. It's Lego is quite a big thing. And some of the other things Archie you're probably into is probably a kind of let's say, I'm going to say an ordering type, interesting type hobby, which is probably quite common across the neurodiverse kind of environment. So there are things, it's just going, how can we engage that? How can we include that? I do hope that over the next couple of years, with this push on inclusion, that will grow. And it's interesting, one of the bits you've written here is you felt you were controlled by the curriculum.
That kind of falls back into the thing I said about me not being having to learn things with everyone else. So along with that, it felt like I didn't really have a choice in what I learned or what I learned more or less about. And that kind of hindered my eagerness to learn anything in general.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you transitioned, makes it sound so nice saying you transitioned from primary into specialist. So kind of what was the reason, or can you remember why you kind of dropped out, stopped going, weren't able to access, depending on the situation, what should be the correct term?
I might need to answer this because I don't know whether Archie will actually know the real what happened. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
So 2020, when the lockdown happened, because of Archie's medical needs, we were actually isolating at home. So all of my children were home and it was me and the kids. And so we decided that we weren't going to waste the time. We thought, I've been in education a little while. I did a bit of homeschooling. And obviously to do that for 4 children of 4 different ages, I couldn't literally keep up with the demand of what the school was sending. So I let the schools know I'm just going to have to do a kind of Clapcott curriculum. And they will be learning every day. There will be maths, English, history, geography, all these things. But I can't promise we're going to get it done in that order, in this way, or whatever. That seemed to work across the board for all of my children. So 2 are neurodivergent, 2 are not. And yet all of them went back to school having learned a lot more. Most importantly for us as parents, we realised that Archie as a person altered. Within 2 weeks of being home educated, his weight had gained. Forgive me for talking about this, Arch, but his bowel medication was working better because he was eating better. That meant his ADHD medication was more effective because we didn't have the underlying bowel condition. This meant he was comfortable, therefore he could learn. It was just this cycle of, it was like an awakening of, well, of course this was never going to work. How could he ever sit and concentrate and learn if he's uncomfortable? And I said to my husband, I've realised it's a little bit like me trying to read a book in peace with a big spider in the corner. I'm not going to sit and read in peace. I'm going to be forever looking at that spider and waiting for it to move closer. And so that's when everyone came back, Archie was supposed to be sitting his SATs and going back with the agreement of his mainstream school, for which I am hugely grateful. His Senko, Mrs. Sybil, she was amazing and she stood by us all the time. I've got no complaints there. She said, I agree, he's doing so well. We decided that was going to be the end of his mainstream journey. And we said we would keep him at home until such time as a suitable specialist provision place came up. That's what we did. And just by luck, a new hub was being built just about 4 or 5 miles from our home. It was brand new. They said Archie would be the virtual guinea pig. And we said, we don't care, we'll try it. It's got to work better than where we are. And now we have a different Archie, which is why we can do what we do, because Archie's sorted.
That's amazing. And that's quite a short journey in reality. For lots of others, that journey is much longer. So you went to specialist. Did it feel, how did you feel going into that? Were you expecting kind of the same and were surprised, or did you go in expecting something different?
I can't really remember fully, but on my first day, because obviously I'd never been to a specialist school before, I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting it to be better because Mother wouldn't stop talking about how much better it is. And
Love it.
But when I first got there, it was definitely better than I thought it would be. I knew it would be good, but it was much better because a lot of the things we had to do, for example, the desks, this wasn't the case on the first day, but maybe a month later, the desks, they'd installed these, they were circular desks. So I was sat opposite and next to someone, and they had the desk border things that you put in the middle.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a wall between me and them.
I think going into a mainstream school and going to a specialist school, even just walking in the entrance hall is very different. And was it a case of, that's what I like, is when you're in a primary school, it's Miss, Mrs., whatever, Mr. Birchall, whatever the name is, Mr. Young. Whereas I think in most special schools, was it first name?
Yeah, it still is now, really. I wasn't used to it for the first couple months because I'd spent all my educational life calling teachers by their last names with Mr. or Miss in front of it. But after maybe a couple months, I ended up getting more comfortable with saying their first name.
But it seems to it seems to remove a barrier, I feel. When you're calling someone by their name and they're calling you by their name, it's kind of making things more equal, which I like. It's things like that I really like. So obviously you went to a specialist school, much smaller class sizes.
Mm-hmm. In my old school, it was maybe at least 13, 15 people in the classroom. In my old school, I'm referring to. But in the school I'm in now, it's, including me, maximum 7 or 8, which is much better for me because it helps me focus on what I'm doing rather than being distracted what everyone else is doing.
Yeah. I think things like those borders, we have them in the office. Yeah, we have people's desks we have all the monitors, but as well as that, there's just that thing. So you're not sitting there making awkward eye contact with someone. Because we do that as adults. If you're ever in a restaurant, you're sharing a table and you're eating your lunch and you make eye contact when you're eating, it's just the worst thing ever. Making eye contact with a stranger as you're eating is just horrible. So as a child, sitting opposite someone can feel extremely awkward. So having that barrier, that border, just to give you that bit of privacy, and it might be your head is still seen, but it means what your work. It means if you've got a fidget toy or if you're building Lego, that becomes much more private, and it's a certain level of respect, if that makes sense. That actually we trust you. You can have that private space. And oh, look, you're not doing anything naughty with it. You're actually using it to maybe help you regulate, stay on track. It actually helps. I'm not saying we do that everywhere, but there are times where it helps. And what's the learning like? What's that curriculum like? Are you kind of doing things you're interested in?
I'm definitely doing more of the stuff focused around either what I'm good at or the lessons I'm interested in. Is more, it's not slower pace, but at the pace of who's learning it. So it's much easier to absorb all the information that's being given and remember and use it.
So do you do much history?
We did, but we don't do too much anymore because most of the people in my class weren't really all that fussed with history, including me. I found it quite boring.
I would say it's neurodiversity, but my daughter loves history because it's so easy to just remember dates and it's easy. But that's the thing, I think. And do you do any foreign languages?
No, because again, with the history thing, not many people were fussed with that. But we do lessons to fill the gaps. So we do occasionally, some weeks we do cooking and either baking or cooking, and it's all different foods. Like we sometimes make spaghetti or bake cookies. And I don't take them, but there's also the option to have someone come in and give you guitar lessons, which one of my friends does.
And do you think not doing French and not doing history is going to have a huge impact on your life going forward?
Definitely, because in my old school, when I was doing French, the teacher was this fella called something Kevin. And I remember I said something wrong and he made me sit by the lockers for the whole lesson facing the other direction.
Good Lord.
Monsieur Kevin.
Monsieur Kevin. I think going, there's this whole thing, I kind of get it, that Ofsted say every child is entitled to the full curriculum. And I'm like, what you feel is full, and what a curriculum looks like for that child and what it looks like is different. And actually where you want to go, your full curriculum should be helping you go to where you want to go. And if French and history aren't part of that, then if French and history aren't part of that.
And someone like Archie, who's more of a didactic learner, he's better off doing languages on something like Duolingo.
Yes.
Where you can sit in your own time, do it at your own pace, not being shouted at by somebody.
So what has kind of going to the specialist setting meant for you?
It means that mainly it makes me feel way less not excluded, but it makes me feel more included, because most of the people there have a very similar attitude to me toward people, and it doesn't make me feel like the odd one out like I did in my old school. It makes me feel more like I fit in with other people.
And does that do you think that helps you boost your confidence?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say it's made me more eager to do things that I didn't initially want to do, but in the case that I am doing something I don't want to do, it's made me more confident in doing it.
What I found with my daughters is if I ask them to do something, they'll never want to do it. If the school asks them to do it, they'll never want to do it. If they suddenly realise it's in their interest, it's almost like having that confidence means they can go tackle that thing they want to tackle. So right now, you might not want to do something in school, but as your interest grows in something, you go, actually, I need to learn this. I feel there's something about that confidence. So obviously and you might not be able to answer this, but being in a primary school, you felt the odd one out. Being in your specialist setting, you don't feel the odd one out. When you're out and about in the world, do you feel more like you're in primary or you're more like in specialist? How does it, out in the everyday world, as you're walking around the shops, how do you feel?
I feel like, I wouldn't say I feel like I blend in with everyone else, but I don't think I feel like I'm too noticeable. Obviously, because I have Tourette's, sometimes I make weird movements, especially with my neck. So sometimes I'll be flailing my head around and some old person will look at me like, what's wrong with you? But it doesn't make me feel excluded. But I'm definitely still a bit different, but I'm fine with that.
But I find, and depending on where you go, and I love going to places like Brighton.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my whole family loves going to Brighton because everyone is a bit different in Brighton. And there is no normal. And there are various cities you go to. So me and my daughter went to a concert in Leeds. And we walked around Leeds and went, yeah, this is all a bit, everyone's slightly different. And another side of Glasgow, everyone, it's like being bright. It's like, be who you want to be. And there is no judgment. And I do think that I think secondary can be the worst for this, but in primary, it's a bit, but it's that conforming and you have to fit in. And if you don't fit in, you're very aware. And I think and that often comes from maybe that, as you said, the curriculum, Archie, that you've got to learn this, you've got to do this, and you've got to fit in. I think as you get into secondary school more, that pressure comes from other children. It becomes more of a social pressure. And I think once you leave education and everyone realizes they're not that model person they were in secondary school, they actually want to dye their hair red or any other color, or they want to do this, they want to get nose piercing or anything else, you suddenly realize there isn't really a mold. It's just this generated idea that happens in secondary. So, Archie, is there any advice you would give to teachers in schools around supporting neurodiverse students?
The only thing I'd really say to them is don't feel like you should be pressured to drastically change absolutely everything, but definitely be open and accepting to the fact that they might struggle or excel in some areas that other students don't. So I think try to be a bit more aware if they're uncomfortable doing something or need something to help them do it.
That's really nice. I like the fact you're saying don't drastically change everything. Your expectations are realistic. Now, what would you say to parents of neurodiverse children who might be younger, not sure what their child's future looks like? What would you say to those parents?
I understand it's difficult sometimes, but most people, if not everyone, neurodivergent or not, always have a special interest or something that they are really good at, like far better than everything else. So if you let them discover what that is, the likelihood is they'll get better and better and possibly find a profession to do that in.
And would you say having a really strong family relationship has given you that confidence, that kind of your parents supporting you to do that is giving you that confidence?
It's definitely made me feel more like I am allowed to express what I'm good at and work on it and try to find things that include doing it.
Nice. My final question around this, if you met a child, maybe in year 3, year 4, and you literally look at them going, you're probably neurodiverse and you're probably struggling, and you kind of know what's ahead, what would you say to them?
Realistically, I would probably say, I understand it is very difficult and you might not be getting the help you need, but definitely ask someone if you can get some help, or if you can't do that, just try your best to do what you can. Don't feel pressured to do everything. Just do the things that you're able to do, and then try the things you're not sure about.
And what would you say if they feel like they are the odd one out? What would you say to them about that?
I would say you might feel different, but everyone is almost the same with things, that the fact they have things that they like and they don't like. Everyone's usually self-conscious about something, whether that be feeling different or feeling not different. So in that case, everyone that surrounds you feels like that a lot of the time. So I would say they're not alone.
That's a really thing, because often, you do think I'm the only one thinking this, and in reality, there are probably lots, but they just might be better at hiding it. And also, you don't know what's going on in anyone else's head. You just know what's going on in yours and think you're the only one. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else you want to share?
When I think about it, there's not really much else I want to say that I haven't answered a question with, really.
I've really enjoyed it, and you've given me some. It's interesting because I kind of expected certain responses from you when I asked you these questions, because you've prepped some stuff, but I've asked you some off the cuff questions, and I kind of went, he's going to say this.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't. You've given me, and again, that's me sort of going, you've given me much more well thought out answers, which has surprised me, which then has reflected on I've prejudged you.
We'll do it.
And that's the sort of thing it's partly age. I think you're 16. You don't know much of the world, but actually you're taking it in, and your understanding of it is so impressive.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming on the show today. Really enjoyed it. And as always, I will be sharing Awesome Archie's contact details and links to find out more about what Awesome Archie do. And you'll find the notes, as always, wherever you listen to the podcast or on our website. Thank you for listening to the show. If you aren't following us on social media, please start following us. On Twitter, we are at The Sencast. On Facebook, The Sencast. On Instagram, The Sencast. Imaginative. And on TikTok, Sencast. We left out the on that one. And The Sencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared, and we help to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. But do you know about Autism Progress? This is our framework for helping profile a pupil's autism and how it impacts them. It's based on CERT and looks at communication, social interaction, emotional regulation, and flexible thinking. Autism Progress also includes a wide range of strategies to help support the pupils. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sencast. This is goodbye from me.
Goodbye. from Awesome Archie as well.
Bye.